With renewed confidence after Dark Trader's completion, I was eager to start my next model. One of the things about Dark Trader was that I never wanted to sell him, so during the painting process, I felt less pressure to make him perfect, and it let me actually make something instead of paralyzing me. So, I wanted to pick a project I could still do that with. I settled on this Friesian body that I batch prepped with a couple other models. Only one or two others made it to that priming stage, though. He was an older mold, and because of that, a bit lumpy and some areas where the sculpt work was smushed. As I didn't have the skill to make him a show-worthy model, I decided to use him for practice. After brainstorming some coat ideas for him, I settled on a black Pinto, something simple for me to practice detailing on. I searched around for some references and airbrushed a white base coat, avoiding the areas I wanted to paint black. Here, he started to take shape. I started to fill in the black spots, and he looked very simple, which is technically what I was going for, but it was also boring. In fact, he actually looked very similar to a release called The Gypsy King from the early 2000s on the same mold. So I pulled up some more references and gave him cat track markings, which are almost like Appaloosa markings, but they're more tiny patches than spots. I even worked some spots down into his feathers. The more patches I gave him, the more I enjoyed it. I decided to pack him full of as many details as I could, both as practice and just for fun, to see how this mold looked like with a fancy coat, and to experiment with my own skills and techniques. Once I felt like he was properly covered in patches, I sealed him, wanting to save my progress as I usually do. Apparently, that was a bad idea. As I sprayed, the paint on his hip crinkled up. I immediately stopped. I was so ticked off. I had just used the sealer on another horse and it was just fine. What was wrong with it now? After sulking about it for about a day, my friend told me that it likely wasn't the sealer. Instead, it was that the Golden brand white paint I had airbrushed him with, for some reason, that particular color would cause problems when sealing because it never fully cured. Fantastic. I got some advice and I carefully sanded down most of the crinkles with a fine grit sandpaper. I was able to cover most of it with more watered down paint. Whatever, it's fine. I'm not mad. Needless to say, I ordered another brand of white paint for my airbrush that night, which so far hasn't reacted, neither has my sealer. So we keep going. After repairing his hip and sealing the rest of the body, I tried out a new technique. Taking white paint, I covered all the spots. White is famously hard to get opaque, but in this case, I wanted it to show through. I left the larger spots mostly uncovered, as they only needed the edges to have this detail. I let the white cast dry, and then started refilling in the black spots in. I left a halo around the edges, giving a mapping effect seen in real horses. I tried to keep them as random as possible, but it's definitely something I need to practice in the future. This step alone in the process took several days, and over the course of the whole thing, I did take more breaks than I did with the previous horse. I then started to work on his face and his feathers. Carefully, I taped off his muzzle and black spots on his belly in order to add pinking with my airbrush. This should have been done earlier, but I didn't think of that. It worked for the most part. I only had to repaint a little bit of the edges, and the blaze on his face needed refining anyways. After that, I added his eyes, one blue and one brown, and they came out lovely. His brown eye had smushed sculpting on that side, so I kind of had to guess, which I think I did okay with. Moving on to his feathers, I started by hand painting a titanium buff color before getting lazy and making it opaque with my airbrush. I had to redo the spots I had there as well. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of foresight with this one. While I was at it, I added the buff color to his mane and tail as well. I mixed white with the buff color and slowly started adding herring details to the feathers, which took so long. Realistically, I should have done the hooves first, but who needs efficiency? Eventually, I ended up with some feathers that you could barely tell anything had been done to them aside from the slightest hint of depth. Yay. I started to work on his hooves, and I tried to make them more detailed. It was a little harder than usual because he had no molding on the bottoms of his feet for me to reference. Considering that, I think they came out okay. The striping on the sides actually came out really nice, and you can see that more than the bottom anyway. Next part was the mane and tail, which I was both looking forward to and dreading. I liked it because it was detail work, but his mane had such tiny sculpting and it was mushed up in places, so I half made it up as I went. I also struggled to find references for this part where the mane was bicolored, but going straight down, so there wasn't much mixing of the colors. Golden paint is also a bit glossy, so it made it kind of difficult to see what I was doing. It was at this point I also realized I had completely missed a spot on his shoulder somehow. Oops. I almost left it because I thought it was funny, but I knew it would bother me. Eventually, I got something that looked mostly right. Later, I added a bit more blending toward the bottom where his hair flipped up on his neck. Then, I had to tackle his tail. I had only done a blended tail once, and it wasn't very good. I searched around for some references, specifically of monohorse customs with this style of tail. The more I worked at it, going back and forth, the better it looked. I probably could have messed with this for months and months. But eventually, I settled on this. Definitely better than what I did before, but there's certainly room for improvement. Unlike Trader, I couldn't figure out a name for this guy. I thought he was very handsome and had a very gentlemanly personality, but a particular name never came to me. Instead, I asked my mom, and she suggested Harlequin romance after some short romance novels started in the 1950s. It really seemed to suit him, so that's what we went with. And with that, I introduce Harlequin romance.